All right, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. It's another episode of the Ankila Theology um, Symposium. This is our second symposium, and we'll be treating a very interesting topic. Something happened on American Twitter, and we thought it, good to address. And so that's exactly what we'll be doing. But to begin, before we get into the nitty gritties, we'll be starting with our Ankila prayer. All right. So, creator of all things, true source of light and wisdom, origin of all being, graciously let a ray of your light penetrate the darkness of our understanding. Take from us the double darkness in which we have been born, an obscurity of sin and ignorance, and give us a keen understanding, a retentive memory, and the ability to grasp things correctly and fundamentally. Grant us the talent of being exact in our explanations and the ability to express ourselves with thoroughness and charm. Point out the beginning, direct the progress, and help in the completion. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 Amen. Let me quickly sort out my lighting issues and we'll continue. Okay. All right. So welcome back, guys. Um, so today's symposium, our topic is on education and vocation, egalitarianism, philosophy, and moral formation. So I guess what we're going to start with is I'll give everybody 5 minutes, sort of just tell us, what they've seen. We sent the notes to us at first to, review to get a sense of the direction of today's topic. So it's not a surprise to anybody here. All right, so I will start with Vade. I'll go to Emmanuel, and then I'll move to Dr. Femi. So tell me what you have seen, and I'll give you 5 minutes. All right, so let us keep to time. Tell us what you have seen concerning education, and we're dealing with this particularly contextually. Now, part of the things that we sent was the sort of what we agree as a degradation of education and bringing it on particularly to a Nigerian context where, and I was discussing this with my wife, funny enough, where, for example, in my university, part of the things that were in the motto were not just education, to make a change in the world in terms of the technological advancement, but there was a clause that interestingly included moral formation, which means that part of the things that the university was going to do for you was to build good, godly character for you. You're not just coming, to university environment to gain a set of skills to become an electrical engineer. In my case, and leave, and maybe you found a company, do something great and mighty. Maybe start the next Silicon Valley. But particularly, the great addition to that clause was that we're going to do something concerning you morally and ethically, so that you you know be a whole-rounded, a more well-rounded individual, and you're able to engage with your world and impact your family and impact your nation, be through patriots and things like that. But obviously, like we say in our parlance, it seemed like an audio motto, because at the end of the day, all the things that seem to affect Nigerian environments, the university environment seems to be a microcosm, of that. So education is seen as purely utilitarian, and then we see that in the kind of degrees that we take. So a good example would be if somebody decided to study religion, the question that everybody would ask would be, for what exactly? Like, why are you studying religion? If somebody decided to pick up something in public policy, they were seen as those kind of courses that were, for lack of a better word, were less. So there was a sort of elite status that was applied to maybe the engineering degrees. My doctor will agree, being a medical student meant that you had, a certain level of IQ that was definitely not the same as the average person. If you were in the sciences, in my school, you wear yellow or blue if you were in science or social and management sciences. If you studied economics, if you studied business development, you were seen as easier courses. So if somebody came out as a best graduate student from those departments, it was like it's nothing compared, you know, to what an engineering student faces if he grinds and fights for his 4.49 and makes a strong 2-1. So how do we deal with education that has become this? And then obviously, this automatically lines up with the kind of vocations that we then do. Because here, if you study public policy, all of a sudden you come out of school and then you become a tech bro. Nobody is doing exactly what they studied in school. What did you study in school? I studied actuarial science. What are you doing? I'm a software developer. Of course. I mean, because we now got to the tech boom and those kind of jobs became more prestigious, such that unfortunately, even people that were doing, the glorious medical sciences, like my doctor, all of a sudden sought to have a tech startup that spoke to the medical space. Or you find a doctor who, while he's cutting his patients, is also going to learn how to do JavaScript and TypeScript and the likes, on the side, because perhaps one day he may blow and leave his medical degree. So we have a lot of those sort of things. And one thing I'll just say before I give you guys the floor, sort of talk about what you've seen from your studies, from your experience. But I remember there was something on Twitter at the time when I was a lot more active than I am now. There was a particular primary school, and they were teaching the children songs. I always reference it because it's very interesting. And what they said was, I don't want to be an alata. I don't want to be an elero. Education is the best legacy. Education is the best legacy. So that means if you are, for anyone in our audience who doesn't understand Yoruba, or perhaps if this gets to an international audience, perhaps alata means you are somebody who sells peppers and tomatoes. Eleron means you sell beef, you sell meat, and livestock, at the market. And education is the best legacy. So education is going to ensure that you don't do these menial tasks, which is obviously why we look down on these jobs in our context and feel sorry for people who decide to become farmers unless they're a farm tech startup that employs great tools. So how do we deal with all of these things? And it now ties in with a lot of things, including, education for moral formation, and then it touches much more, I think, maybe much more American things like egalitarianism in the workplace, where we want to force all the outcomes, especially between the sexes, and we're not concerned really with, the differences in the sexes. We flatten the curve. Everybody must have the same outcome. Everybody must do the same courses. What a man can do, a man can do better, a man can do best, and things like that. So, um, so I start with Wade, like I said. What have you seen from studying this topic? What have you seen in your experience concerning education, how it ties in with, vocation, things like that. So I'll give you the floor.
Hello everybody.
Right.
So the way Jide said, in his uni they had like a moral component to their motto. It was the same at mine too. In fact, when people got punished sometimes, in the sense that they were suspended or expelled, what the authorities will say sometimes is, "We are here not just for," they call it character and learning. So you're not just for the learning, but for the character part as well. And if you don't display a good enough character, you don't deserve to be a part of this community. But it's obviously um, hypocrisy, it's fair to say, because like the reason why those things are being done sometimes, a lot of times, is just because of how it seems, not exactly what it is. And so the character part of it, in quotes, is not really what they claim it is. And I think this might be linked to the Nigerian context, is it is religious and political at the same time. So we see that everywhere, in the university and outside the university, maybe in the country as well. And the question is, what is the I think the question for me is, what's the point of education? What is the end of education? Is education the end of itself, or is it a means to something else? Well, in different contexts, I feel like it probably has different meanings. Here in Nigeria, the end of education is a better life, so to say, um, comfort or social esteem, and that it kind of affects how we see what we do. Uh, and so the question oftentimes is, what is the point of this stage of education? I mean, one of the points we're supposed to discuss um, is tertiary education for everybody, and I think that if we look at it from the point of like the way it is currently, the reason why I don't think everybody thinks it's for everybody. A lot of people in Nigeria don't really care about tertiary education anymore at this point. The point is because it used to be looked at as a way to achieve prosperity and social esteem. But all of that has been flattened now. If you have money, you would have social esteem, you would be prosperous in quotes in that sense as well. So what is the point of tertiary education anymore? And so I don't think anybody in Nigeria right now thinks tertiary education is a human right, so to say. I don't as well. Maybe for slightly different reasons, but yeah. Uh I guess that's
Okay.
my
We'll get to
thoughts.
yeah, we'll get to your reasons as to why you think that even teacher education is not a fundamental human right, and then obviously we'll ground what we all describe as teacher education. So, Jagana, the floor is yours. Thank you, Jude, for giving the time. Jagana, the floor is yours. Is Emmanuel there? I think he's frozen. Emmanuel, yeah. Okay, no, no. It's your turn. Yeah, please go ahead to contribute your introduction shots.
Me?
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Um, well, our current discussion started as an offshoot of what happened on American Twitter. Stephen Wolf put out a tweet. He talked about how classical education, as it is practiced now in the United States of America, has um, egalitarianism living within its intestines, within its bowels and systems, like a parasite. Because the claim classical educationists make the claim that education is for moral formation, and they, will I say, underemphasize the role of education when it comes to vocational training and vocations. And so Stephen Wolf took a hit at that, insisting that um, not everybody will be morally formed per se. Not everybody would rise to that peak of moral stature that classical education advocates for everybody, and that some people would need the moral formation more than the others, and the others should go ahead and get a proper education that gives them a vocation. And then someone else replied, gave a very extensive response, kind of corroborating what Stephen Wolf said, and I can't particularly recall all of it, but he talked about the necessary hierarchy that exists in life, and so which is why we now looked at the angle of egalitarianism in education. So now coming to our Nigerian context, I've been complaining. Allow me to toot my horn. I've been complaining, at least on Twitter, which is my major battleground, that number one, tertiary education is not necessary, and that number two, people make a big deal out of tertiary education, university to be precise. I say first of all that our universities are bloated and they don't produce the quality graduates we expect to them to produce. But the main argument, the main support people use to lend credence to the fact that as many people should be allowed to attend university is the issue of social mobility. So you have someone who came from a poor background, went to university, got a job at an oil company, an oil firm, and so he's now very rich, has social esteem. His economic status is up there. He can take care of his immediate family and even perhaps his extended family because he went through school and now he has come into some level of social usefulness that brings him to that level of economic comfort. And so people use that as the reason why education is the best way to change your social status. But the example I use, the metaphor I use to discredit that idea is this: that number one, education might, or tertiary education might increase the number of people who, or might give you a chance at the national pie, but it doesn't particularly increase the national pie. And well, not that it doesn't, but it doesn't do it in good, great measures like we expect. So we expect that Nigeria has churned out millions of graduates since how many years, and the country is not any better for it. So you have to start asking what is happening. And what is happening is that egalitarianism lives in the bowels of education as it is, whether it's coming from an economic standpoint or from standpoint of expressive individualism, which is that, oh, if someone can do it, you too can do it. So it's now as if everybody gets access to the same thing, and we try to abolish all sorts of hierarchies and competence and um, innate abilities that are further trained and refined. We think every child should just try to get their economic lot improved in life. But the question now becomes: is that the purpose of education? Because here now we have to deal with a matter of purpose. We have to deal with a matter of first principles. The problem with the thinking that people should go to tertiary institutions because it's good for social mobility, the thinking there is very short-sighted. It thinks in the short term. It's very myopic. It doesn't look back and it doesn't look forward. It has no sense of purpose. It's riddled with what I call accidental benefits. Truly, people go to universities and they get a lot of benefits from it, but benefits of a thing does not imply its purpose. Something can be meant for one purpose and still give myriads and litanies of benefits. So um the decline is fast now because of the egalitarian mindset that, oh, something is prestigious, something is nice, everybody wants to go there. It's like a gold rush. There's gold here, everybody moves here. It now leads to the fact that other things are suffering. Polytechnics suffer now because they are now being viewed as second rate to universities rather than things on their own. A polytechnic serves a different purpose from a university, and technical schools serve still other purposes. People who should have been in technical schools are struggling through universities, um, and they're not getting any real benefit out of it. People keep using outliers. And it's everywhere, even in entrepreneurship, right? You get someone who got an idea, he becomes a billionaire, and everybody thinks everybody should just go there next. It's a gold rush mentality that comes from a very wrong idea of what man is, or how do I put it, or anthropology, or philosophical anthropology. We need to start asking, what is man? um Man as a, whether genus or species, how is man constituted as a group? Because first of fine, man is a rational animal, but nonetheless we have different estates in life. Some people are more talented than others in different areas, but because of our rabid egalitarianism, we abolish all sorts of hierarchies, we abolish all sorts of differences that might suggest that some people are better than others. And we're reaping the very, very bad fruits in that while we are heading towards the site of gold, in quotes, we're not particularly getting any better. And so it's a time for us to revisit what is education, what's the purpose of education, what is man, how is man as a social animal constituted. These are the different things that I think should factor into our um discussions on education and see what we can do from scratch or afresh. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jagger. Thanks so much for that. Obviously, we're looking forward to your thoughts. Spend time to pick up the topics that we have planned one by one. So, Dr. Femi, floor is yours as well. 5 minutes, and then we get right into the
Yeah,
discussion.
thank you. On education and vocation, egalitarianism, philosophy, and moral formation. It's a very interesting topic. Um, I am here today majorly as a passive contributor, but the little that I will say today, I hope to pass across certain cogent points. Um, Teleology is everything, and one's organizing principle will determine eventually the kinds of processes one sets and then what one is oriented towards. So in Nigeria, it seems like economics is the major organizing principle for education. I remember my father and his generation, they would say something like, now he grew up in a village and then began the long march towards the city and then upward mobility. And then they would say something like, there's poverty, and the way to match up to people who are rich is through education. So those who grew up in the village, there's the mindset that if you go to school, you get a chance at doing something meaningful in life. And something meaningful in life usually means becoming something that can give you a good economic standing. And I think that that is a faulty organizing principle. Those who founded my school, the best school in the world, Great Ife, one of the things in our anthem is for learning and culture, sports and struggle. Now, I don't know how much in practice the school is aiming towards that, but in principle, that's a very beautiful stanza in the anthem, because it's nothing about it even talks about economics. It's talks about the multidimensionality of life. We learn, and then we are acculturated. There's sports, and then there's the ever continuous fight against all the pressures of life as struggle. So education is beyond economics. It's the classical educators would talk about virtue formation, and I think that that is a more worthy orientation than economics. Yes, we can talk about all the other accidental benefits of education, but parents, individual societies need to ask, what are we oriented towards? Because if it is economics, the problem with economics is that money, and if we maybe we can use the word mammon, is a very difficult beast to tame. It's a very difficult beast to tame, and it's one that incites people towards greed, towards all sorts of bad behavior. So if we are oriented towards economics, we would definitely jettison moral formation. And then there's also this shifting tide with economics, where certain professions, certain kinds of trade brings money in a particular era. In another era, it's something else. So there's that continuous shift and turn. So if our organizing principle is economics, what will happen is that we'll just be an anywhere belle face kind of people. And that's what a lot of you guys have been saying. So this is what is booming now. Tech, let's go to tech. This is what's booming now. Let's go to this. And then the other problem with that is that the less presentable vocation, which are nonetheless essential vocations, will be despised. And no society can function well if those essential vocations are not upheld. Peace and usually tell a story about a city that lost a war because there was no nail to repair the shoe of a soldier, and then because there was no nail to repair the shoe, there was no shoe for the horsemen, because there was no horsemen in the cavalry or something like that. Then the war was lost, and it started because
Yeah.
a shoemaker could not do his job. But we have a society where the purpose of education is to ensure that you are not omalata or you are not alata yourself.
You know, see?
It's definitely not going to work. You know, it's definitely not going to work. So, but at the same time, or just as a sequel to that, one of the things I want us to bring back by reason of this discussion is to be comfortable with using words like hierarchy, comfortable using words like ordered difference, comfortable using words like unique vocation. And everyone has their unique vocation, whether it is the supposedly high professions or the low professions. Everyone has their unique vocation, and we must fight the what C.S. Lewis would say, the hatred of superiority. Like there are people who are better than me with regards to particular respects. There are people who have more authority than me with regards to particular respects. And that hierarchy of authority does not necessarily translate to an hierarchy of intrinsic value. We can have different stations in life while at the same time being equal in our essence, and we must be comfortable with that. And at the same time, we should also work out how do we want to ensure that there is honor for the less presentable parts, in quote now, which is usually what sponsors the hatred for superiority. People have seen that, oh, those who are in the lesser station, so-called, are looked down upon. And so they hate any form of superiority, and everybody wants to sort of even out the echelons of society, you know, and then leading to a rapid egalitarianism, which does not work. Nature, the goal of nature is not equality. So I'll stop at that.
Thanks so much, my doctor. That was a wonderful exposition. You brought to mind the number of things I've read. I'm sure if maybe one or two of us, or maybe all of us, have read the book by Dr. Keller concerning work. I'm trying to remember the name of the book now. I think I've read it. I think I read it once, twice. Yeah, and then obviously, I mean, fundamentally, all of us are Christians here. So there's something very interesting that he mentions, about, and again, Nigeria is not cooked, for lack of a better word in our parlance. Nigeria is not cooked. So you look at a nation like America that is cooked, and obviously, in as much as we see, some Christian underpinnings here, we are seeing that to a large extent they are so economic in their nature, and in that direction that we begin to see fundamental problems. One of them that Dr. Keller highlights is that the educational system, for example, sort of trains graduates such that they aspire for the big four. If I'm consulting, I mean, you understand what the big four is: BCG, Bain, McKinsey, and the likes. Why? Because it is in consulting that you seem to have your self worth, and then by the time we are doing reunion 10 years down the line, and Dr. Femi comes, Jegede comes, Vay comes, and I arrive. Right, the only way that I or Lajide will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Femi is for me to tell him that I'm now an associate manager, at KPMG, the US. So one of the things that he highlights, obviously by reason of what the work that our blessed Lord does, he should highlight people who were not suited, right, for a role in consulting, right? They had other giftings, right? But obviously, because of the economic undertone of the university system, they pursued such a vocation. And obviously they meet the Lord. And they cannot give, testimony and instances of people who, with a repurposed idea, of work, going back to the first principles of who we are, as human beings, the issue of original sin, and then, God's giftings, and God, determine the boundaries of our existence and our various estates. You find people who then quit this 6-figure per year roles, which is obviously huge, in the American context, for you to start earning 6 figures, per year, and will leave that for much, 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 I mean, a lot lesser paying jobs, right? But tailored to their, I guess we can say their tailored to their giftings, but a lot more fulfilling. Right? I mean, you get a case of people who would leave consulting roles and would pursue things like photography, that pays a lot less. And I'm not talking photography where you aim to take pictures of the greatest celebrity in the world and you're paid millions of dollars. But very, very, very simple jobs. Some of them will take up some sort of vocation in NGOs, and I mean NGOs, not the one that they're using the money to fly private jet to go for conferences, but actual NGOs where you begin to organize things, to meet certain needs that you see, certain gaps. So obviously, even though I mean, we're just talking about the American system. That is something that is particularly evident here, like Dr. Femi stated. So when we're having universities, we have mottos that seem to sort of align, with the grand vision of true moral formation, and not just a particular skill or vocation. And it's audio. We're not really seeing the effect in our society with the amount of guys that we're training. So I guess we can then piggyback off all your contributions here to then say, in that case, you know if we're seeing problem in the educational system, and we're going to stick to tertiary, because I mean, one of the things I saw when I watched the podcast this week by the King's Hall was that they highlighted, the evolution of education. I'm sure some of you are aware, to a large period of time, education was for the nobles, and for those who were clergymen. So obviously, you're going to be trained as a pastor, as a minister, or whatever. You had to go to school, you had to learn the classics. And if you're of the noble class, obviously that presupposed that you were going to be involved in some sort of civic duties. You understand? So if you're going to go in some civic duties, you also had to learn. You also had to, be involved in this kind of formal education, right? While for people who were not nobles, in the lower class, the peasants and the likes, they usually would continue in the family trade. So if your father was a blacksmith, you were definitely going to be a blacksmith. If your father was one who forged swords, for the army, you were going to forge swords as well. You're going to be a very great blacksmith. But then I think I can't remember the name of the theologian particularly that he mentioned that piggyback of the idea of the priesthood of the saints, right? Just and it flows from the idea of Luther, where everyone should have access to the Bible. Do you understand? Everyone should be able to read, at least to be able to communicate with the Word of God. And he went off that idea and said at least everyone should have an education, which makes sense. I mean, everyone should be able to read and write, to be able to communicate with the text, right? But obviously, from that idea, we've seen different changes, we've seen different metamorphoses, that have gone on. So for us now, especially with the fact that Nigeria is not cooked, is tertiary education then necessary for us? And I'll say this before I would, open the floor for any of you to raise your hands to answer. I think it was Emmanuel. You mentioned apprenticeships. You mentioned technical schools. And when I was in school in England, you would find some colleagues of mine who went to BTech. Right, they didn't go to regular A levels. They went to BTech. They were properly hands-on as electrical engineers even before we started the electrical engineering degree. So they were very hands-on. In fact, when we did electrical competition at the time, they always won because they were very hands-on from time. Some of them with their fathers were already electricians as well before they came to study the course. So we had technical schools like that. We had apprenticeships. Wouldn't those qualify as tertiary education? If we're going to say that education is not necessary, so what will you qualify those as? So if you qualify those as tertiary education as well, it means that maybe we want to, create a lot more nuance. So, I'm opening the floor for questions. Is tertiary education necessary? And let's keep in mind that we're working with our Nigerian context. We're not speaking into here. So, I mean, who wants to go?
Well, I can go.
Yeah, please. The floor is yours.
Except Emmanuel wants to go.
No, please go.
Well, I really just wanted to say that, well, everything it's a matter of definitions. When we say that is education necessary, it's a matter of what education are you talking about. Obviously, education is necessary. That's different from say formal education, for example, because the interaction between a child and his parents is an education. Every interaction between the child and parent, the toddler, is either learning actively or passively. Every time I say, "Oh, don't do this, don't touch, this is fire, it's Jojo Hot," that's an education. So definitely, education is necessary. Education is a constant thing, is ongoing. But that's different from formal education. And I liked the what you talked about in the ancient world, where we had the certain priests and rulers who were educated classically, while other people were educated by their parents. They were educated at home
Yeah,
and they
family.
followed the trade of their parents. And one of the things I would like to say really is that the proper sphere of education is the home. The primary education, we say primary school. The real primary school is the home. What we do in our primary schools is to outsource what parents should be doing, right? So I think that there's a universal basic education that is necessary. And truly, the universal basic education is administered in the home. And it is only outsourced to the degree that parents are unable to do that, which is unfortunate because of the orientation towards economics. Parents are out of the house and not able to spend enough time with their children to educate their children, which is the way that things have always been in most of the
Yeah.
world. Education is done by parents, and this is important because I was reading, I think was it, I can't remember now. I think something from Aristotle or something like that. And yes, it was Aristotle, I think Magna Moralia. He was talking about the fact that medicine, and this resonated with me as a doctor. Medicine, when you treat people, you don't bring people in a group and say, okay, all of you, I'm just going to give you anti-malarials. If you want to treat people well, you have to take each person and listen to them, hear what their problem is, and then administer the correct medication. And then you move on to the next person, right? So medicine is tailored to be individualistic, at least for a major part of it. And it's the same way education is also tailored to be individualistic. Every single child is a unique soul, and we must cultivate that soul in its unique way. So the idea that let's just take everybody to a primary school, secondary school somewhere, and then let's teach all of them the same things, and then the society will turn out well. It doesn't really make sense. So even as much as we are outsourcing universal basic education to a primary school system that is teaching each the same things, we must know that it is still not an effective system. And then this is also important because we take that to the tertiary education and think that everybody must have the same kinds of exposure. Meanwhile, some people are more suited for the formal education by reason of their unique location. Some people are supposed to be technicians. Some people are supposed to be sportsmen and different things. And that should determine what kind of education they get. You mentioned the idea of the universal priesthood of believers. And even Luther and other Protestants who affirmed the universal priesthood of believers did not do that at the expense of the ministerial priesthood, those who serve other believers. They didn't abolish all the offices of the church because universal priesthood of believers. No, there are people who are given special vocation, and those people who are given special vocation should be specially trained in that regard. And so we should not have to say, oh, rabid egalitarianism, as we have talked about, that we must make open all kinds of education to all kinds of people so that we are seen as an egalitarian society, as a society that treats everybody fairly. The best way to treat people is to treat people according to their unique vocations. And so we must stop the idea that, oh, every child must go to university or something like that. No, if the child wants to learn fashion designing, let him learn his fashion designing. I'm very good at that. And I don't know. I think I'm speaking too much. So I'm just going to stop now.
No. You're not. You're not at all. You're not at all. It's very like it's necessary. Like try to think that you are grounding for us to see because try the angle on universal basic education because again it's in the American context, but we have a few examples of a few of ministerial institutions that we have that do ensure that the primary school is done at home. The universal basic education, funny enough, is done at home. And there are certain subjects that maybe the parents are not probably well suited for in their own estimation, in which they get somebody else from their local church, right, that comes to the home, right, to continue their education. Obviously it seems like an outlier, it seems weird, but I mean, just like I said, that when I listened to that particular podcast with Jegede, but I took my time to listen to it because I needed to understand the sort of solutions that they were coming up with. I mean, and one of the solutions that they mentioned was that, again, going back to your 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 statements on the universal basic education and being able to pick, the the uniqueness of each individual soul that is the child. They made mention of how people make excuses that you can not truly know the child's strength unless he goes to school. And I mean, they asserted that, apparently he mentioned that he has like 4 kids, and apparently he can tell, because he's with his kids, he can tell that this particular person seems to be more musically inclined. This particular person seems to be more technically inclined. This particular person seems to like, reading a lot more. So, he can make a reasonable estimation, even before they get to secondary school, that this is most likely the path my child is going to take. Obviously, there are going to be, several changes and shifts as the child grows and things like that. So, one of the things that they've done is that particular local church, they started a school, primary and secondary, and um, as part of, again, the whole idea of universal basic education, which is not perfect because, again, you know people can still decide to outsource that, and give their kids to the school without doing any much work. But part of the way they want to do, part of the ways that they're trying to mitigate that is they have a four-day school week, and on a Friday they're fully at home with the family members. They're fully at home, you know, as a way to ensure that there's a sort of synergy between the teaching faculty and the parents, so that it's not that it's the school and teaching faculty that is fully forming your child, but there's also a high level of input, from the parents in the formation of the child, which is very interesting. I mean, just want to mention that, as you mentioned, universal basic education. So I'll put the floor for another person to make comments. Like, Dr. Femi, in case you have anything else to say, I'll bring the mic back to you before we move on. We don't have that many things to talk about, which is why I want to draw the meat out of the few things we have to say. So, Jegede or Vid, which one of you wants to go next concerning the necessity of tertiary education? Dr. Femi has expanded the conversation into the necessity of education itself. So please go ahead. Emmanuel is smiling. I suspect he has something to say.
No, I don't know if Vid wants to go, but his mic is still muted, so I'll just go. So is tertiary education a right? I think I would follow Dr. Femi's pattern. Right. So first, say look at certain distinctions. So um by education here, I think we've mostly meant formal education, but I don't think that captures all that education is. So um education is broad, and when I mean broad, I don't mean broad in the highest sense of it, but education is tightly linked. If the human sense was right, if we were working as philosophers from first principles, education is always linked to culture. There's no there's no separation, there's no severance you can make. Education is tightly linked to culture. They say, okay, so it's this way, it's like religion, culture, education, or sometimes religion, culture, but because it's not our current concern, politics. They say politics flows downstream from culture. But education is a way of um getting the children, the young of a particular genus of people into their cultural attitudes, their cultural habits. And that is why classical education, as it is, chose um, certain materials that they call the canon of classical education, because those things reflect their culture. It reflects how those particular group of people take on the world. Um, and this is again directly linked to what man is. Man is a rational being. A man is a rational being, a rational animal. His rational faculties must be trained and refined to interact with the world, apprehend the things that are in the world, and particularly apprehend the things in his cultural context so that he can be an effective participant in it. Rationality is, or culture is, would I say, a social obverse of rationality. So education may not be restricted to formal education, as in sitting in a classroom having a defined set of things to be taught. However, there is always dogma involved. But education is also broad in the sense that vocational education is a type of education, because mine is not only Homo sapiens, he's also Homo faber, or he's a making man, he makes things. And there are some people who will make things better than people. Mine is not just a man of mind, he's also a man of tools. He uses tools, and that is where vocational education comes in. So I said this so that I can go and answer the question if tertiary education is the right. Now, by tertiary education involves or should include the university and vocational and technical education. So, but um, for university, it's a no. It's a clear no. It's a clear no, because now we must now look at the purpose of a university, right? The purpose of a university is, according to Newman, who wrote the book, The Idea of a University, is meant for the cultivation of the gentleman. That's its summarily. It's meant for the cultivation of a gentleman, and you do this cultivation by looking at by using universal knowledge, the things that are universal. And that is why philosophy is a foundation, an anchor, and a cornerstone of a university. And I've said this before, that a university abolishes its philosophy department, it ceases to be a university. No matter how many doctors, engineers, architects, accountants, lawyers they are churning out each year, if they have a if they have in fact if they have a vestigial philosophy department. When I mean vestigial, I mean, there's a philosophy department in that university, but you can't really feel its impact. It's not a university. It's a career training institute that's wearing the veneer of a university, because right in the essence of a university is universal knowledge, which, because theology for now is not in doesn't have that reputation anymore, philosophy is now the one that ties it, because the essence of university is to give you knowledge in all things, in all departments and all areas, and philosophy is what ties them all together. So is a so you now have to answer the question that, do you think everybody is suited for that type of thorough and philosophical education? No. Some people have um, intellects and aptitudes for that kind of thing better than others. Some people are, will I say, aristocratic by spirit, maybe not by birth, but by spirit. Some people have that nobility and gentlemanliness that has to be refined and made out of them. That that for some people, no matter how much you put them through that machine, they will always come out on the other side as non-gentlemen. So in a university education is not a right. It's not something all can do. Therefore, it's not something all should do. This is looking at the secondary substances of man, like his possible aptitude, talents, dispositions, and the various estates that we have regarding our talents and aptitudes. A vocational education as well, because let's be sincere, some people are useless vocationally. I don't know. I don't imagine Socrates would have been a very good anything. I don't think he would have been a very good shoemaker. I don't think he would have been a very good mechanic. I think Socrates was just good as Socrates, right? And there are some people who, when you observe their aptitude, it's better for you to just take them to the university and let them become gentlemen. Let them spend their days in researching what may look like useless knowledge, right? It's not practical, it's not geared to give you economic comfort, it's not meant to make money. And that brings me to another thing in the Nigerian context, that a university is at some point expected to start turning in profit. No, a university ought to be it ought to be where money goes to waste. In quote, in that you're supposed to pour a lot of money into people just researching knowledge that you might not know the use of, even in a century to come. And there are some people who are better suited for those kind of duties and vocations than others. Right. And so those kind of people, if you leave them, if they are stuck just trying to get by day with their technical education and their vocations, they might not particularly be good at it. They might keep flopping at it, right? But you find that their strength is within the walls of the ivory tower, which is the university. So obviously for me, no. But again, vocational education doesn't have to be something that happens formally, right? You have your basic education, and we'll come to the subject of basic education later. You have basic education, and while basic education is going on, vocational education can also go on. Like technical education, picking up a skill that allows you to be economically productive. Because I mean, you don't want people who can read books. You don't want everybody in your society to be able to read books and to be able to philosophize everything and not be economically productive. You have to there has to be a way for you to fund your love of learning, right? The love of learning is in and itself an end, so to speak. It's because, okay, so let's even look at the etymology of school. The etymology of school comes from schola, which means leisure, right? And it's in leisure in Latin is otium, while business is negotium, right? And it's a negation of leisure. So you are supposed to go from business to leisure. You're supposed to. So there's a reason why you have to be economically productive. So there's no reason why skill acquisition cannot go on with basic education. And then later, when people want to go to university, they can go and just learn for the sake of learning, for the sake of virtue, and for the sake of exercising their rational faculties. Should it be a right? Definitely not. It's not a right. You don't you don't have the right to spend your days in an ivory tower. It's a thing that is given to you according to your lot, your talent, your attitude, and your aptitude and your disposition. Thank you.
Also,
Can anybody
all
hear me?
right. Yeah, Lala, yeah, I heard you. I heard you. I said also. So, Vade, do you want to contribute, or they've said all that's meant to be said, and I guess I can go to the next question. What do you think? Do you have something to add?
Uh, yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So I want to build off of the um, doctor's point about how um, before a specific set of people would be educated in that sense, and then other people would learn from their parents, so to say. And I think it kind of brings us to the question again of what the point of education is. I think we'll discuss that later, but I think it's relevant to this point as well. Because
Go ahead. Go ahead.
to the person, I think the point of education is to an extent help them achieve their end, so to say. And the a person's giftings obviously have a part to play in that. What are you more suited to? The way Emmanuel said it earlier, and obviously, if you exercise yourself in the part that you're more suited to, there's like a degree of happiness. There's like a satisfaction because you're being used for what you're. I don't say created for, but in a sense, your giftings have that particular advantage, and so that is what the point of education should be, I guess, to the man. But then to society, the point of education is to um, orient,
Blow.
organize. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
Yes,
ahead.
please.
Okay. To orient, organize the individuals in society to better the society. Everybody's life is better if people are doing what they should do. Is justice, so to say, and I guess that is how we can answer this question on if tertiary education is a right.
Necessary.
Yes, thank
Most
you very much.
necessary. Yeah.
Sorry. And uh, aside the universal basic education, we've been talking about tertiary education when I think we've actually meant university, and I guess everybody has kind of said it explicitly in some sense because if we look at the use of the education to the man and then to the society, no, I don't think it's a right. Not everybody has to do that. It's not beneficial for everybody to do that, both for the person and for the um
Institution.
society. Yes. Uh so no, I don't think it's necessary.
Awesome. So, what we've done so far, because we're running out of time, but what we've done so far is we've been able to tie in the necessity of tertiary education, and then we've defined, what exactly we mean by tertiary education, and then drill down to formal education, which is what everybody usually hears when we have tertiary education, and drill down that that form of tertiary education is not necessary. Obviously, it's based on, you know, again, generically speaking, your telos, right? What you're more suited to, your giftings and your callings in life. We've touched on whether education is a right, which basically ties in with the necessity of tertiary education. Dr. Femi also did a great job in expanding, how education starts, um, from being taught, being schooled on outsourcing education, because of, the dynamic of economics that we have. Not to go into the conversation about how, we're having two-parent households where both parents are going to work. So obviously you want your child to be trained, and so you outsource that. You're spending minimal time with with your children. All of these things have adverse effects. But nevertheless, we've agreed, on the form of education. And I think the last topic I'd like us to address before we sort of touch on our own approach to sort of education, because there's no point discussing all of these things, highlighting issues, what is ideal, without talking about what we think is practical, especially in our climb, and particularly for the Nigerian context, where sometimes we see the necessity of see the necessity of the two parents having to work in order to sustain, because of the tough economic circumstances that we have. We cannot deny that these things do exist, right? So we have to talk, in practice, what do we do? How do we start from where we are to what do we see as perhaps the solution to the problem? So before we get to that last part of the segment, as we begin to round up, my next question will be the current trends in vocation or work and the pursuit of happiness. What are the current trends that we're seeing? I know we've touched on them a bit. What are the current trends that we're seeing? I mean, one of the things I can mention, particularly, that we're seeing is that we have it. We've had a few things that we've seen. So I mean, we like motivational speakers like to do this thing a lot. Where we talk about the big names like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, how they never finished university. We talk of the Mark Zuckerbergs, they never finished university. They got what they needed from investing, and they dropped out and things like that. Now, obviously, at the time where it was they were trying to use as a motivation for us. We heard things in the past like school and scam and all of those things. One of the things that we fail to realize is again the estate of these men, and our own estates. We have examples like this as well of people who didn't necessarily need school. They've built good businesses, they dropped out of school, they're involved in education, shoemakers here and there, and the businesses seem to be doing pretty well. Um, right. We've seen this trend, right? But again, it seems like in our context, if you don't have a degree, it's rather difficult. And again, I want to narrow it to our context, not an American context, where after secondary school, once you know how to program or something, you can get a job. I'm talking about our context. A good example for me would be we have people who have skills after school, but certain companies will not accept you because they're not done university and you have not finished your compulsory National Youth Service Corps. How do we deal with these things? What are the current trends that we're seeing in our space? Because we're seeing startups spring up and they're employing people without the need for these things, right? But again, it's a reality in our context. So I want us to limit it to the Nigerian context. What are the current trends, that we're seeing in vocation and the pursuit of happiness? What seems like signs of the good, and what seems like it's setting us back, even further, than we think that we're suffering from right now. So I'll open the floor. Who wants to go first?
Well, I just want to say that we should not be under pressure to offer any practical solutions. And there's a Catholic social philosopher who says something along the lines of the practical man is always in a hurry, and he doesn't think that it is a necessity for people to happen around first principles. Like he feels like merely speaking about first principles is a waste of time until you have done something practical. No, it's not just starting. Um, so the I don't think we should really be in a haste to bring up practical solution. I'm not saying that you can't bring up practical solution. I'm just saying that there's this impulse that until we have taken it down to something practical, then we have really not done anything. I don't think that is right. Um, there was many centuries of scholastic ratiocinations before we eventually had the rise of the scientific method. And some people would say that the years of scholastic ratiocinations was a waste of time, but really it was not. It was those years of um, deep philosophizing and theologizing that actually molded society to a point where it could bring up the scientific method. And there are many um, experts that have talked about the link between this. So, if we are being true to even our program, if we are going to end on the notes where we do not provide any practical solutions, we should not think ourselves not to have done anything, right? And if all that we should be doing is to set forth the principle and allow the practical men to do practical things, then that's fine. So there are some people who their vocation is to be able to do the ratiocinations, the highly intellectual cognizing and all that. And then there are the practical men who will put boots to the ground and all that. So if we don't do anything practical, we should not be beating ourselves that wounds. So that I'm just adding that.
Thank you so much, my good doc. I completely agree. Because I myself, I've thought through, different, like, what do I do? I mean, it's not like I can wake up tomorrow and totally crash down the current educational system. I mean, that's not how this works. So, that's not how this works. So, obviously, having to discuss about things and not having solutions is also okay. So, thanks so much, doctor, for that. So, like we're saying, so any current trends that we're seeing, as well, and the current trends, obviously, like the Femi said, you don't have to prefer a solution. Just in terms of things that we're seeing, obviously, one of the things that Femi mentioned at the beginning is the rise, for example, of the tech boom, and obviously that sort of steered us away from the regular um, vocations that everyone in the last two generations sort of wanted their child to get into, because that was the way to some form of prestige. The doctors, the engineers, the lawyers, and the likes. And obviously, we have a lot of people who are getting their hands dirty with writing code and things like that. You know, um, and all that stuff. So, what are the current trends that we're seeing? As regards the pursuit of happiness, I already mentioned the whole Alat and Eleron story. At the beginning, and we're seeing a lot more of that. Another one that we're majorly seeing, for example, which I experienced a lot, is concerning the issue of, you know, um, living in country for greener pastures, not necessarily, for some form of self improvement or anything, but greener pastures. And obviously, we know what greener pastures means. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. Obviously, we can't blame anybody, particularly for doing that. But again, we're a Christian podcast, fairly Christian framework. So we're seeing the current trends, and we're trying to make sense of it. So, Jagade and Vid, do you guys see anything in the process of vocation and work? I'll give one more example. I remember I was in the office a particular day. One of the things I tried to do this is me. Is anytime a dispatch rider comes to my house, and my wife and I have been in duty, for example, to take a bottle of water to them to appreciate their good work. Because if there are no dispatch riders, my wife and I, on a day that we are deeply steeped in work and we're not able to go and get certain things, we'll not be able to eat. We'll have to suspend eating to much later in the day, to make us a lot more sloppy at work and things like that. So that's our way to sort of elevate our minds that these guys are absolutely important for us. They're a huge part of the economy, um, and it is dignified labor. It is dignified labor. They're very much needed. Right. I remember I was in the office one day, and then I saw one of my colleagues. I mean, obviously these people are Nigerians as well, so I mean the same moral feelings that we who do the regular office jobs have. They have the same moral feelings. But I remember I was just randomly hearing somebody, and they were raining courses at the dispatch rate, and I just sat at my table, just thought to think that I mean this is um, symptomatic of everything that is wrong, with our context. Not just because this guy, is not doing something that is um, what we consider a great job, right? It's the reason why we can talk down on him. We get a lot of this as well. I remember times when I didn't have a car and I used to borrow my pastor's car, who so generously, allowed us to drive. There's a certain flavor, there's a certain prestige that I got until I bought my own car, which is obviously not as great. I mean, I'm just starting my life with my wife, and the vibe is a lot different. Like when I arrived in place, with that kind of a car, and I'm arriving in the same place, with a car that I'm enjoying, and it's doing what it's supposed to do for me. It's different. So we're having this kind of, issues, and small parts. This also affects our our education as well. So I just said that to just sort of juggle our memories for current trends that we're seeing. Vic is already laughing. Current trends that we're seeing in the educational landscape, the kind of things we consider in the pursuit of happiness. Where, for example, I say that I find fulfillment in studying theology, and people are wondering why in the world I'm wasting my time and my talent and my man hours when I can take my electrical engineering degree or my current job, and look for opportunities to travel and relocate with my wife to make better use of my abilities, as if doing theology is not a great use of my ability in the pursuit of the highest truth, which is God's truth. What directions are you seeing?
Okay. I have to take it easy on the my wife thing, right? Right. But trend trends I'm seeing is that b- because university education has taken on an extremely utilitarian character, other things have been neglected, like basic education, primary and secondary education. Now, when people put out um, a job opening, a posting about a job vacancy, and they request someone who has a bachelor's degree, when in fact the bachelor's degree is not necessary, and the person can be, say, trained on the job, and you begin to ask yourself what they are looking for. And what they're looking for is that they're looking for something the degree confers, right, and not the degree itself. And the question that becomes, what does the degree itself confer that these people are looking for? And for me, I would think that what the degree, or what they are looking for that they think the degree confers, is a type of acuity, and I mean, showing that you are capable of going through the um the motions of a mental task. And but why do you need a bachelor's degree for that? I would say it's because we've wasted the potential in a basic and a secondary education. Why? Because at the time you are taking at the time you're being taught in your primary school, you are being taught to take your subjects seriously so that you can get into secondary school. Like, okay, so your primary education is meant for your secondary education. So you get to secondary school and they tell you to take that seriously so that you can get a good course in the university. So it's like everything is gearing towards the university, and the university is where you finally become what you are meant to be. However, if you think of the primary education as a good in and of itself that prepares you not just for university as its ultimate end, but as for life. For instance, I mean, I have one of my fights in this whole education thing is that people are always saying, oh, they should start teaching this in school, start teaching emotional intelligence in school, teach financial kiniko in school, teach that in school. So it's you realize that these people are living in particulars. They're always moving from one thing that is trending to another. They have no coherent thought that looks at the long string of things for years and decades and centuries. What's reigning now? Emotional intelligence. Okay, let's teach people how to do emotional intelligence in school. What's reigning now? Oh, how to do your taxes. Oh, let's start teaching people how to do your taxes in school. And I'm like, that's utterly stupid, right? A, a primary school curriculum as of now is still sufficient, can work. It can work if teaching social studies, basic science, basic technology, English, mathematics. These are the foundations of proper literacy that someone who actually exercises their mind, I'm saying literature, would, with a good and thorough primary and secondary education, will be able to hold his own in civil conversation with people who have bachelor's degrees. Because I mean, even in a Nigerian context, you go to NYC camps, orientation camps, and they say graduates in quote, can't spell their names. They can't they can't speak coherent English. They can't make basic calculations. They don't know basic geography. If you look at how Newman ideated a university, you realize that a university is just a more sophisticated work or more sophisticated attempt of what you are doing in primary and secondary school, which is basically giving you general knowledge, universal knowledge, having a basic sense of the world, having developing your intellect up to a particular point. It's just that at the university you do it at a different level. But if we can get basic and secondary education right, I think you have people you can train on the job, and unless they admit to it, you will never know that they've never been in the walls of a university. They don't have a degree. Why? Because they speak well, they are literate, they have good um, they have good taste for literature. Their comprehension skills have been worked on because they have worked through texts that demand a lot from their comprehensive faculties or their faculties of comprehension, and they have a coherent view of the world. They know how things work. They know how reproduction works. They know how, at least at the basic level. So they are not entirely lost on the world. They have enough knowledge in their arsenal to make metaphors, to write essays, and give their coherent position about what is happening in the world. You don't need a university education for that. From secondary school, students should be able to write essays, coherent essays that are good. I think we should I mean, just solidify what is a basic and secondary education is, and you will take a lot of weight off what is demanded of people in university and to getting a
Right.
bachelor's degree. So that's the trend I've
Mhm.
noticed, and
Mhm.
that's my view on it.
The one I particularly note before I give the night of Femi as we are closing out, um, is you made mention of topics like emotional intelligence, financial, and all these things taught in schools, and again it sort of drives home Dr. Femi's point that because of the outsourcing of so many of these activities, I mean, you would expect. I mean, obviously, we have our issues with the definition of emotional intelligence and the likes, but at least you would expect that a basic understanding of how to treat people, right, would be learned in the home. I mean, I'm not expecting that the entire of the moral formation of my child is left to the school. Which is one of the things that I'm sorry I'm going to mention my wife. One of the things I've mentioned to my wife is that if we're unable, because I mean we have to start from somebody, if we're unable to homeschool, one of the things that I'm going to be particularly involved in will have to be the parent teachers association of my child's potential school, because I need to be well aware of what you are teaching my child, because the moral formation rests primarily with us at the home. Because I mean, just a quick example. I'm sorry. One of the things I've learned to do is to bring out narratives. I think they tend to drive home the points. I remember a particular time when I was in primary school. It's not as if Nigeria has always been great. When I was in primary school, I remember clearly that we learned instruments. I could play the violin. I could play the recorder. Right. There were even extra classes. If I wanted to play the piano, I would learn to play. And what we were playing was not modern music. It wasn't contemporary music. I was playing Beethoven. I was playing Bach. I remember one time I picked up when I went to seminary last year. One of the members of one of the people that came to seminary. He brought his violin. He was just learning, and I picked up. And I was trying to remember minuets from 20 plus years ago that I played. Even I can't play the violin that much anymore. I know a few things, but I can't remember because I haven't played in a while. You know, and parents were involved. These are the kind of things that you wanted your kids to be taught. And then I saw a video online, of a school recently, and they were doing an end of year show. My brothers, I kid you not, they were singing contemporary music with no meaning, holding the mic, and they were doing like it was a performance, like it was one of our, regular Nigerian musicians with no moral foundations. They were singing that, and then, at least with the general sense of morality that we tend to have here, many were complaining that, come on, how would you allow a child to sing such a thing? Like, come on. And for me, again, that drives home the point that if I, as a parent, I am properly involved in my child's PTA, I won't let such a thing fly. Because moral formation, sits with me primarily, and I should be involved in this with the school long enough to let them know that there are certain things that these children are meant to be exposed to. There's a better use of the time. I mean, again, it is dynamic we find ourselves. I just wanted to mention that because that's particularly interesting. And people will mention that there are certain skills that are meant to learn at home that the school should add to the curriculum. I mean, what are you at home for? So please, Dr. Femi, the floor is yours. I think I'll take your passing comment as the last, and then we'll round up.
All right, thank you. I guess this will just be a bonus point to anyone who has watched the video up until this point. So I wanted to give the full quotes that I was trying to recollect from the social philosopher, and then I'm going to relate some personal experience to audience. So it's from Jacques Leclerc, and he was speaking on common good justice, and he says that men occupied with practice interest themselves with the precepts of immediate application. Social philosophy is scarcely studied except with preoccupations with immediate realization. As happens always, the practical man has the impression that the principles are sufficiently known, that they ought to be sufficiently known, and feels certain irritation with some regards it and feels certain irritation when some regard it as still necessary to inquire into. They have the idea that in re-examining the principles, one loses valuable time for action, and that in casting doubt on received formulas, one unnerves action. So that was the quote I was looking for, such that people, and this also plays into why in our country, subjects like philosophy, theology is not respected, because they feel like do the stuff that bring the money, and then all this theologizing or intellectualizing and all that is just waste of time. And society today is suffering from a death of good thinking. People are not thinking right. People are not grappling with first principles, and it's also disturbing us. So we just have received formulas, things that people have erected and say this is the usual trend. Everybody should go to school, and everybody should go to university, and then we are just following that motion, and nobody's trying to say, okay, this thing is not working. All the some of the ills that we're seeing in our society can be traced back to this flaw in our first principle. And to relate a personal story, something that comes close to home, my sister, my late sister now, my senior sister, she's late now. I remember growing up, she always struggled with academics. Primary school, secondary school, tertiary, she always struggled with academics. She was not a dullard, but she struggled. Um, when it came to time to pick with whether science, arts, or commercial, you know, the trend at that time was that if you are in other departments, you are a dullard, so you have to go to science. So she went to science out of pressure, and then she struggled. She left school, secondary school, and then she eventually went to do economics in the university. Even though, yes, she did struggle with it, she came out with a 2-1. And all the while, she's just not someone who is cut out for academics. She was very good hands-on, so she had a lot of skills that she could have cultivated if given time to do. But the trend is that do go to school, go to university, do masters, and then she went on to go and do additional masters again, and then she couldn't even, she just, at some point she just stopped it and said, I'm not going to continue. Eventually, at some point, she developed mental health issues, and things spiral down from there. So that's actually a practical point, even though I'm the anti-practical man, which is that parents need to know their children, their children, and see them as unique souls. For me, I picked up the saxophone while in secondary school, in my music school, and I just had the natural inclination for it. I started learning how to play by myself, and I was getting very good at it. All that the missing piece was for me to get a personal saxophone, and I told my dad, Get me a personal saxophone." and I believe that he had the money at the time, and it was the read your book, focus on book, don't get distracted person. And that was how I did not get to buy a saxophone and perfect my saxophone skills. So you guys have missed out on the opportunity to get the best Nigerian saxophonist. So of course, later in life, I did pick it up. I did pick it up after school, but there's just not enough time at this point. So maybe sometime in the future that would occur. But the point remains that every child has their unique abilities, and education, like Vade said, is actually, it's supposed to be an assistance towards realizing the unique end of each individual. So, and then that's what we should aim towards. Paul's analogy of the body comes to mind again when he spoke about the gifts of the spirit. When he used the body, the eye, all the parts of the body cannot be the eye, and the eye cannot say that I don't need the hand, you know. But every part of the body must play their proper function, such that even the less presentable part will be given due honor. And until we achieve that wonderful symphony that we find in our body, and then translate that to society large at large, we will not be able to function maximally as a society. So every part has its unique function, but each unique function is eventually for the whole, and that's how organisms thrive. So that would be my last point. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Dr. Femi.
yeah.
I mean, it's a great last point to end the episode on, and for everyone to sort of think about. Um, so, thank you so much, guys, for joining. We've already spent slightly above the time that we planned. Thank you guys for taking time out of your Saturday, working hard stop nights. It's just about 12 noon, right? So, I mean, if once the video goes live, anyone that has any extra comments and stuff, we can always do that, and we can, revisit some of those topics on a subsequent episode if we see fit to do so. So thank you again, you guys for joining. Thank you to everyone else who's going to watch this once you upload it. We appreciate you guys for spending your 1 hour 30 minutes, hearing the four of us ramble about issues that we face, and striving to think better, to know much more, and to honor the Lord with the minds that He has given us. So it's goodbye from myself, Jide, Emmanuel, Dr. Femi, and Vid. See you on the next one.